Hello, Comp One. You know, you'll probably be unsurprised to find out that one of the places where I am the most happy and the most excited is to be in a library. In here in Minnesota, in central Minnesota, we have some wonderful libraries where I've logged an awful lot of time. We could think of, for instance, the Miller Center Library at St. Cloud State. Many of you are going to be headed to St. Cloud State. Many CLC students go down there. That is one of the most gorgeous libraries I've ever seen. They spent tens of millions of dollars on it. It's massive. I'm thinking of my other job, my little part-time job down here at the College of St. Benedict and St. John's. We are in the basement of the Eagleton Library, where I've been spending time ever since I was 18 years old. It always freaks me out a little bit. You know, you walk 3 or 4 steps through the stacks, and you will pass by more books than you will ever read. All these books frowning at us from the shelves for not having picked them up yet. I think of that little library in the Little Falls in the center of that town. I love that library. Lost a little bit of its old-timiness when they upgraded it, but I'm real fond of that library. And Central Lakes College has a first-rate library named after the Minnesota writer, John Haslund. Maybe you know that. Plenty of people like me have imagined not just a library, but a total library. A library that doesn't just have maps and books and periodicals, but a library that has everything. Every dream you've ever had, every thought you've ever had, that fishing rod you left out in the rain in 1970, that old motorcycle that you love so much, you know, that northern that maybe got away, the buck you missed while hunting, etc. A library of everything. Of course, to me, heaven is a kind of a library. Now, obviously here, what I'm trying to do is make a pitch for spending time in libraries. I would love to tell you that I descended from a long line of academics, right? That for centuries we've been in libraries. Well, that'd be a lie. I'm descended from Swedish and Norwegian pig farmers. When my ancestors headed down to the Roman Empire about 20 centuries ago, they encountered libraries that were full of books that were not able to be read because they were illiterate. You know what they did? They set them on fire. They burned those libraries, most notably Alexandria and Carthage. I'm trying to do a little better here in the 21st century and adore libraries. Now, for the reading part of this course, obviously what I've done is gone into this wealth of books. I'm in a library where there are 1.5 million volumes, and I've asked you to read one book for this semester, and that is from F. Scott Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. And what I'd like to do today is to communicate sort of just in a condensed form the gist of what I've been talking about with your classmates in the face-to-face classes. There's just a few things I want you to know about Fitzgerald, about how literature works, and maybe give you some pointers on the paper. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is that earlier this semester on this campus, I was lucky enough to hear a very famous genius talk about literature. His name was Terry Eagleton. And to my utter astonishment, and maybe I misheard him, Eagleton announced that picking out a sequence of books for any class like Comp 1 or Comp 2 or any course that you aspire to teach is really an absurd proposition. Eagleton claims that all of these books really don't have anything to do with one another, that they're isolated. I think that's the most ridiculous thing in the world. I sat there thinking, how could someone this smart have said something so wrong? Each one of these books is a kind of prism that you can hold up to the light that will send out different colors. Each one of these books, as Borges puts it, is a kind of axis and a point of intersection where there's just all kinds of relationships. I refuse to believe that The Great Gatsby is an isolated book. Pick that novel up. I know you already have. I know you've been reading it, and I know you're about to hand in a little paper on it. How could that novel be isolated? That book speaks to anyone who's fallen in love. That book speaks to anyone who's had a dream, who's maybe seen a goal be a little bit far in terms of distance and difference between where they were and what they could grasp. Who doesn't have a little bit of a romantic in them, like Jay Gatsby? And I just think this, like I've said before, if you can learn how to read The Great Gatsby, you can learn how to read any of these books. It's not about just understanding that novel. I encourage you to go to Wikipedia or wherever you want to go and learn about F. Scott Fitzgerald. To tell you a couple of things, he really was one of us. He was born in St. Paul, Minnesota on Summit Avenue. And at the age of 18, he sort of headed out on his own and hardly looked back. But he's a Minnesotan. That's one of the reasons I chose him. I also chose him because he is from a very famous generation of American writers, dubbed by Gertrude Stein in Paris as the Lost Generation. Let me tell you a little something they had in common. They were all born between 1896 and 1900. Some of the greatest writers of our times were born between 1896 and the year 1900. In that little breath of 4 or 5 years was born Ernest Hemingway, William Faulkner, F. Scott Fitzgerald, Malcolm Cowley, Kenneth Burke, Thomas Wolfe, Catherine Ann Porter. There's a really long list of great writers. That made them, of course, the perfect age for soldiering when World War I came around. And that leads me to wonder how many great writers we lost in that terrible war that killed so many millions of people, and the flu that took so many more after that. So Fitzgerald is definitely of an age. He's of a time period. The Great Gatsby, written in 1925, many believe it was his finest novel, sort of captures a mood. It captures an age. And we might have a few lights flickering off here and on as we go because there's sort of motion detected. But tell you something sad about it. It captures this famous jazz age era. You know, America was doing wonderfully, population economically was doing wonderful. And Fitzgerald writes this great American novel, hoping it would make him rich. I want to tell you, it didn't make him rich. 20,000 copies were printed by Charlie Scribner, and you know what? It didn't sell. They sat on bookshelves like these. They were gathered up at the end of a period of time and thrown into a big vat and turned into a slurry so they could be made into other novels. He dies shortly after that, only a few years later at the age of 44, face down on a typewriter with a heart attack. And of course then everybody went, wow, great American novel. Let's print 150 million copies. So he got totally rich after he was dead and earned the thing that I'm hoping for, posthumous fame. I want to tell you a few other things too in terms of elements of literature and to get you going on writing this paper. Maybe Jeff, you could walk up and down these aisles and stir some of these lights back to life so it doesn't get all dark on me. That'd be kind of scary. It's in the dark here with all these books. There's a few rules about literature that you need to understand. Now, I've written a memoir. I've told you already, it's the only book I've written, and it's probably going to be the only one I'm ever going to write. And the reason why that is because I'm not a great American writer. I just want to be an English teacher and serve you. Were I a great American writer, I would write many books. But the reason why I've only written one book is because I've written one story, and that's a story I understand. If you want to be a great writer, you have got to be able to create something that Wayne C. Booth teaches me to teach you is called an implied writer. Okay? And we have that in The Great Gatsby. In The Great Gatsby, F. Scott Fitzgerald dreams into being a speaker that he sends forth to tell the story. And that's Nick Carraway. He tells the story in first person. And the big game there begins in terms of, you know, where does F. Scott Fitzgerald leave off and where does Nick Carraway begin? A writer can't disappear entirely, otherwise we don't have the book. The big thing to wonder about is where F. Scott Fitzgerald left his paw prints in the book and where he just dreamed something. We run into all kinds of problems here. You must have noticed that Myron Wolfsheim, the criminal in this story, is a Jew who's not very impressive looking, right? He's got human molars for cufflinks. He's also a complete criminal, helping out with the 1919 Black Sox scandal. That's a very unflattering portrayal of a Jewish man. Does that make F. Scott Fitzgerald anti-Semitic? I have no idea. It's up for you to decide. There's little bits of Minnesota in this novel, little bits of St. Paul in this novel, little bits of F. Scott Fitzgerald's Catholic background jumbled up in this novel. And I want you to know that. Writers send forth an implied writer, so to speak. You don't know this, but you send forth an implied reader when you pick the novel up. And one way to think of that is to realize that anytime you pick this novel up in your lifetime, you're going to read it differently. My son, our cameraman and editor, has read this novel. Well, he's 17. You know what? When he reads it years from now, when he's my age, at the age of 52, he'll probably read it differently. I, for instance, when I read this novel, sent forth an implied reader back in the early 80s, and I cheered Great Gatsby. I cheered Jay Gatsby on. That's probably because I was falling in love with my best friend's girlfriend and I wanted to steal her affections. Now at the age of 52, Jay Gatsby makes me a little bit nervous. He's a dreamer, and in literature, the dreamers get it every time. they're always punished. They always suffer. It's pragmatists like Nick Carraway that actually survive novels. So we have this fact before us. F. Scott Fitzgerald created a voice that's telling the story, and you're sending forth a reader that may or may not be you, depending upon what mood you're in, what time you are in your life, etc. I want you to know that.